Hey Heart students, I miss seeing you guys. This project is actually broken up into two videos, and the first one is the drawing step. I show you the finished product, which is right there behind me. I'm filming this after I did the whole demonstration, so you get to see that from its birth as just a plain white sheet of paper. So it's just going to be the drawing step, this first video, and then I will, once I get it edited, I will upload the second video, which is all about adding color. But you could apply this so many different ways. The first video really shows you how to create the composition, and you could do it exactly the way I did with the materials I used. But if you want to like really run with just the drawing aspect of it, you could take that first step and just leave it as a black and white composition. It's really, I think they're really beautiful. Or you could save it, or you could make multiples, but you could save one and do, right there again, the coloring steps. So enjoy the video. It's about a half an hour long, and the coloring video, I don't know for sure how long it's gonna be. I'm not a great editor, I've learned. But anyway, it's a lot more fun teaching with you guys in the room versus by myself. But enjoy the video. I'll see you soon. Bye. Hey Heart family, today is a new project that I'm calling The Works, and I'm calling it The Works because you know the Papa John's pizza that has everything on it? That's kind of what this artwork is. It has a little bit of everything in it. We have, it's mixed media, so there's pencil and marker, permanent marker, then there's oil crayon, colored pencils for drawing, and there's also watercolor paint and tempera paint. And there are tons of concepts. Patterning, patterns, repetition, spectrum, Roy G. Biv, tint, tone, shade, and also shading. There's also depth and layering, and it just goes, the list goes on and on. So we're gonna get started. I based this project being inspired by an artist that I found on Instagram called, I think it's Paintbrush Rocket. I will put her link in the description so you can take a peek at her work. She doesn't have a whole lot of stuff posted, but what she does have, what's cool, is she also shows stages of a couple of her projects. So you get to see the development, you get to see the layering that she does. So this is my example, and this was just 3 pictures of the artist that inspired me. And when I look at her artwork, actually that one's upside down, she signed it right there. When I look at her artwork, I think of, it's like a map of the city of Colorville. And so you have highways that go through this city. It's like an aerial view, and then you have different areas of the city divided up with different developments of color and pattern. And so when you look at her work, there are things that you can see that are similar among all of her pieces. And one thing a theme that she uses is these lines are like highways that go through her artwork. And so when an artist does this, and the highway, that's not a technical term, it's just what I'm calling it, but when an artist does it, they direct the viewer's eye. Like an artist knows how to, when you see their artwork, they can get your eye to like drive through the artwork, say with these lines. And here, these lines, some of hers arc, it kind of reminds me if you're looking at an aerial view of a city and you have these cloverleaf highways, and in this one you have these 2 main highways. Now since it's the city of Colorville, it's a scenic drive through the city. So there's no boring bad sides of town. They're all beautiful scenic sides of town. And so there are these wonderful spaces between her highways where she has developed some different patterns and uses of color and experiments with color. And all of it is just really delightful for the eye to enjoy. Some things that she has, some elements that we'll go over that are common in her artwork is the checkerboard. I love this. I'm calling it quilting circles. Again, I'm making these names up, but we'll go over quilting circles. Then these are so much fun, these little areas where it looks like stones sort of stacked around each other. There's some right there. She also does a thing where she breaks up spaces with triangles. There's even like a color wheel type of a thing. Repeated lines on these shapes. And then I love like these corners. It's kind of a tiling that she's doing, and repeated arcs that end up looking kind of like rainbows in her works of art. So we'll talk about all of those things, and you're going to be able to apply the things that you want in your picture. So let's get started. Okay, so I decided I wanted to use watercolor paper, but I decided to tear the paper out of the watercolor board, and I'm going to tape it to this surface. The reason is I wanted to see how this composition would look if I had that clean white edge around it. And when I'm working in the block, one thing I found is this little lip that kind of sticks up from the adhesive, it gets in the way a little bit on the edges. And so I can eliminate that problem and see how taping it down, giving me the clean white edge, will make it look. These were just printed off of the pictures from Instagram, but you can see just on the printout there's that white edge, and I think it adds something to the picture. So I'm going to give it a shot by taping it down, and I prefer to not tape it right to my dining room table. Maybe you're in a situation where that would be appropriate, but I'm going to tape it. I have this tray, and so it's just a flat surface and I can move it around, so that's what I'm going to tape mine to. The first step is to draw the highways that go through our city of Colorville. And to draw a highway, you want a line that's going to start on an edge and then go into your composition or into your city of Colorville. And it could go and end on another side of your paper. It could any of the other sides, or it could even turn around and end on the same side. So I'm just kind of thinking through, well, how do I want my highway to move through my picture? And I think I'm gonna do one. I'm gonna do one that begins and ends on the same side, like so. Now, any highway that you do, this is right now just a line, and I've divided my paper up into two shapes. But I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make it look like a highway. So this line needs to become a shape in and of itself. So it requires two lines to make this line a shape. So getting close to it, I'm going to draw a second line that follows along. Now, you don't have to keep the width of this line uniform. You could make it wider in some places and come and be more narrow in other places. Okay, now my next line, it could intersect with this line, or it could, again, just start on an edge, finish on an edge. But I want to show you what it looks like if it does intersect with this first line. So I'm going to have a line come in from this side, and when it gets to this first highway, I stop. I don't draw on top of the highway. Instead, I pick up on the other side, and then I'm going to end over here, and so I don't hit the highway there. I don't draw on top of the highway. I instead pick up and then run off the paper. Now I get to make a decision. Do I want my highway to go wide on this side of the line or go wide on this side of the line? And I think I'm going to take it to go wide on this side of the line. And just simply what I'm thinking is if I put the line on this side, this is going to be a really skinny space here, and I don't want that. So I'm going to start over here on this side of the line, and this one I'm going to keep pretty narrow just for personal preference. You could make yours wide if you wanted. It could be a wide highway. But again, I do not draw on the first. So automatically, I've created layers in my composition now. And I also have broken it up into multiple spaces. So first, the layering, because I didn't draw on this, we now have overlapping, and this highway appears to be on top of this highway. What I also have done is I've broken up Colorville, the city of Colorville, into like these are both shapes, these long thin shapes, but then the Colorville has been broken up into here's a space, here's a space, here's a space, here's a space, and here's a space. And as an artist, you just want to keep your eye on the shapes of those spaces too. You want those shapes to be interesting. The next step, or the next thing you could consider, is do you want a highway that goes into Colorville and doesn't touch any of the other highways? And I want to try that. And I think I'm gonna repeat this sort of, reminds me of the Arc in St. Louis, the Gateway to the West. And I like that reference. So I'm gonna do a smaller highway and just kind of repeat that shape. And I make a point that it doesn't touch any of the other highways. And then I'm going to use 2 lines. There we go. And then the other thing you could consider in your composition is the sort of free and independent shape in your picture. So on both of these, you have this space here, and then on my example, I have that space. And I just kind of think of it as there's this like a pond in Colorville, and then there's a footpath that goes around that pond. Now, these are not technical terms, but they work. So I keep looking up here, like I think it needs a pond. I'm trying to decide, do I need to do a pond here or here? And I might just do 2 ponds. I'm gonna start up here. They don't have to be perfect circles or ovals. They could be, maybe even you want to go geographic with yours, but I'm going to keep mine organic, which means I'm still going to go with like a rounded, generally a rounded shape. And it's going to be completely contained in this space. And in order to do that, let's see. All right, I like it. I like how it's working. And so I'm going to add that second line to make it into a little footpath around that space. I stop, analyze my composition. Do I like what's going on? And I really want to repeat one of these shapes over here. So it's a good time to stop, analyze. Do you like what's going on? And if you do, then it's time to get a nice and juicy Sharpie. You want a permanent marker because you're going to be putting wet media on top of this. If you use just a regular marker, it's going to smear. So the permanent marker, even though you get wet media on here, it's going to stay nice and black and not smeared. So now I'm going to go over all of my pencil lines. Okay, I did my black Sharpie. There's this one little spot here that looks sort of funny. And then I erased my pencil lines. So I want to go over how you can make some of these patterns that Painted Paintbrush Rocket did in her compositions. So the first one I want to look at is this beautiful, they look like flowers, like this beautiful little flower pattern that you can kind of play with how you put your colors in, but it's actually made up with circles. So if you look at the flower and you look for the circles, you can see them, and it's these just these cool overlapping circles, and you're trying to create a football shape when you overlap your circles. So let me show you how you could make that pattern. So we're gonna go through a couple of different patterns, and then you're gonna use those patterns, your choice, how you want to, and you may even come up with your own unique patterns. These are just to inspire you, but you're gonna fill up these spaces that you've created. So I've created this big space here, this little space, this space, this space, this space, this space, this space, and this space, and even this space on the bridges it's an opportunity for you to work with pattern. So I'll get some extra paper here. The first one I'm going to show you is that flower power pattern. You can freehand circles if you want. I think this is just, I love how clean this is, and so I think having a circle template or a circle you can trace is going to help you get that clean look. The size of the circle you use is going to be up to what you can find around your house, what you have available, and your personal preference. So I found this little mason jar lid. I like it because I can hold it easily and draw that circle, and then it ended up being a nice scale for the size of paper that I'm using. Again, your paper might be bigger or smaller, so it will all depend. But I'm going to just simply start inside the space that I'm working, and I draw a circle. Now I'm going to overlap with this circle, and what I'm trying to do is look at where it overlaps right here. Have I made a cute little football that is kind of like 1/4 of the circle? So I wouldn't do a giant football like that. It has to, so if you think of where the center, and I'm just going to put a little dot there, this petal has to be on this side of the center of that circle. If it's at the center, then my petals are going to overlap. And there's probably like a science to this where you would do it perfectly, and I'm not a scientist, a mathematician, but I'm just eyeballing it for the purpose of this work of art. And I think artists are pretty good at eyeballing it. It is not going to be perfect, and I think she probably measures hers out, and they are perfect. For the purpose of what we're doing, I'm not going to worry about that perfection, just going to eyeball it. If you want to find out a system to getting it perfect, by all means, do that. But there are my first 2 circles traced. Now my goal is all of my footballs, I want to be about that size. So I'm going to go beside it, do another football. Go beside that, do another football. Now then underneath, I'm going to find where that intersection is, and that's going to be outside of my circle. I'm going to get close to it, but I can't intersect over it. It needs to be outside of that, and I'm looking at the football shape here, trying to make it about the size of those 3 that I made. You can see there, I now have 2 petals to this flower, and now I'm going to overlap here. Now this, it gets a little bit easier because I can position it so it's outside of this petal and that petal and that petal. Ta-da! So I've made my first flower here. I'm going to do another one. Made my second flower here. My third flower there, and then I move down here and start again. And the trick is to get it close to, but not inside of the other petals, and trying to get my footballs about the same size. So in my picture, to apply this in my picture, the one little trick is that I'm going to be bumping into edges. So looking at my composition, I think I'm trying to decide where I want the quilting circles because I really like the quilting circles. So I think I'm gonna do this space here outside of this pond, under the inside this highway, under this highway. So this shape here. So I'm gonna include even this space here. I'm gonna include both spaces. Well, let's see if this works very well. So I'm just gonna pick a spot. Oh, this is gonna be hard. And the thing is, I can't draw on top. See how I did that circle, but I didn't draw on top of my pond and footpath. And so then I'm going to overlap here. So but I do overlap my pencil line, so right there. Okay, so I did overlap here, but all of this football you can't see. I'm going to make a football over here, and then I'm going to make a football here. So it may require you practicing this flower power quilting circle a number of times on just blank paper to get to where you can apply it in a more complicated area like this. But I'm going to continue filling this up with this football, with this pattern. I'm going to go ahead at this point and then go over my pencil lines with the marker. And although you have to think a lot and it's kind of complex, it's really satisfying when you get it in there. Anyway, there's places where I could say, ooh, but I kind of messed up here or there. But overall, I like the design, and so I'm content. Okay, some of the other options for your design will be checkerboard. So here she applied a checkerboard pattern on one of the bridges, but there's also a checkerboard pattern in like a little quadrant or a little section of the city there with colors. So you have the black and white checkerboard. On mine, I decided to do a 3-wide checkerboard, one of the bridges going through my town. So in this composition, if you want to do a checkerboard, I think I will try a checkerboard. Well, the way that you do a checkerboard is really simple. If you have a bridge, then you would simply put a line down the middle, or in the case where I did the 3, I did 2 lines down the highway because it was wide enough, and then you just cross over like so. And this would be a pretty tight checkerboard on the road, and your goal is to make your spaces on the inside squarish. So how close together you put your lines kind of depends on how big your space is. If I had a big space in my picture that looked like this, I could have my lines spaced out much further apart because it's a big space, and I could still do plenty of lines across, and each individual shape ends up being squarish, so you get that checkerboard effect. Now, if you're doing the black and white, of course, the way that you color that in, you could take the black marker and you would color in just the one, and then color in, you go up a space and color the opposite one in. So that's how you get the checkerboard effect. If you choose to divide up a bigger space, you could just outline it, and then if you wanted to do black and white, you could, or in this case, she painted inside with several different colors. So I'm gonna hold off like applying it to my picture and just go through a bunch of the ideas, and then I'm gonna go to my picture and decide where I want to put things. I knew I wanted the flower power somewhere. So that's why I went ahead and did that one. So you also have triangle spaces, and like here is an example, and this is simply, she has a space, or you could have a space, and then if you divide it up, and in this case I could do layers and then break that up into triangles, like so. It's almost like a giant zigzag line, and then you could reverse it like so, and then the same thing over here. And so now the space is divided up into triangles. Now, not everything has to be perfect. Maybe you have an awkward kind of a shape, and you can divide it up like sort of in triangular type areas, and then maybe divide your triangles into different triangles. And this is kind of a fun space when you work with color, because you can do like in each triangle, like these could all be shades of blue, but it'll be 3 different shades of blue, or a tint and a tone and a shade of blue, or 3 different blue markers. And then over here in this triangle, let's see, I'm going to continue that, say this triangle, maybe I want to do explore reds, for example. So it's kind of a fun sort of a place to explore color. So you can see like in here, it's 3 different yellows, 3 different oranges, 3 different reds and tints of red, blues, and then greens, which is the Roy G. Bibb. So the yellow, orange, red. She went from red into the blue, so warm colors, and here are cool colors. So she's working with both different things. Even there's like spectrum analogous colors, and then these are analogous colors, whereas the blue and the blue and the red, with the white in it, starts looking sort of pinkish, which kind of brings you a little bit closer to purple. Nevertheless, it's just 2 primary colors there that she has explored. Then if you repeat curved lines, you can get this rainbow effect. Oh, here's some more triangles over here where spaces have been divided up into triangles, and then colors have been explored. So I really like arches, and then the repeated lines, you can make it look like rainbows. And so on mine, in several different places, I repeated arched lines. Well, anyway, I ended up, this one I really struggled with. I didn't like it in the end, and I've changed the colors a number of times. I'm happy with it now. It was pink, and it looked like a giant Cuterebra, which is this really disgusting worm that we pulled out of our cat a couple of years ago. And so I had to paint it yellow. I had to get rid of the Cuterebra. That's way too much information, but it happens in art sometimes. So a couple other ideas that I want to show you that she puts in these spaces before I get to just filling up my page the way I want to, fill in these spaces the way I want to. So in these corners, she does these neat little, it reminds me of ceramic tiling, and then these spaces where she has organic rounded shapes, and they're stacked together, or they're placed in beside each other. It looks like there's grout between them. So really it's tiling. Both are examples of tiling. So my brain really struggles with seeing how she did this, but I'll show you the best that I can get it. I'm breaking it down from the corner, and so it looks like she does this longer section. So I'll just come in from the corner of this paper and do a longer section, and then she does sort of a fatter section that goes up like this, and they not one is overlapping on top of the other, that those lines intersect, so you see the individual tiles, so to speak. So then I'm going to do another one that's slightly bigger, slightly wider, and slightly taller, and she kind of rounds the corners, which again sort of adds to that tiling sort of effect. And then I'm going to do another one that's slightly wider and slightly taller. And then I'm going to come over here where I did this one, and I'm going to follow along that line and go up and do another one that's slightly taller. And so inside here you have like this rectangle, and then you have kind of this squarish shape, and then this squarish shape, and then this is more of a rectangle. So you have different sizes of quadrilaterals, squares and rectangles, and then you can even add, she added another one here, so you're starting to get this arching effect. Another one on top up here, which gave her a place for more arching. I'm gonna do another one, and then another arching space in which she did then the tiled stones. So inside that space are these rounded organic shapes that are kind of like stones. They do not overlap, they just butt up against one another. And then she even did another arching shape beyond that. It kind of reminds me of, oh, there's a type of art from the early 1900s. I can't think of what's not arts and crafts, but there's another name for it. It kind of reminds me of that style of art. And then it doesn't have to be a long skinny shape that has the stones. You could take any space in your picture and then just line up these stones. As long as they aren't on top of one another, it does give that tiling, grouted effect. So it's time for me to go back to my picture and decide how I want to fill in the spaces. So we've gone over so many different techniques that she uses. Another one is just breaking up the highways with lines. So this one, some lines that go across it, and then here are some that go down. And some of these you can add right now on your base drawing, and some can be added as you add layers. So I'm just going to go now into my space. I have these spaces left, and I'm going to figure out how I want to make the city of Colorville, every area of the city, interesting to look at. Okay, so now I'm okay with my design, so I'm gonna go ahead and go over my pencil lines with Sharpie. Hey Heart Family, so that's a wrap on the drawing step. Just get your composition drawn up, take your time, think through the concepts, and make a beautiful composition. Go over it with markers and erase your pencil lines, and the next video we'll go over all of the color steps. So there's tons of layers for adding the color. You might want, if you have time, you might want to make multiples of the drawing, and maybe you pick one to keep black and white, or you have a couple to do coloring. It just kind of gets addictive. It really is fun creating these compositions and adding color. So look for the next video. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.